It's almost been 10 years to the day since what I am about to tell you happened. Despite the length of time that has passed since that night, I still have a very clear and vivid memory of everything that happened to us, and we frequently recall the events. If after reading this account, you decide that you don't believe it, I won't blame you. If I hadn't experienced it firsthand, I wouldn't believe it either. In 2007, I was a manager at the Living Well Health Club at the Hilton Hotel in Nottingham City Centre. Myself and a colleague, Carl Bennett, one day began discussing supposed spooky happenings that were frequently reported by guests and the staff of the Hilton. We were skeptical, to say the very least, that our only purpose for the discussion was to have some fun and to give ourselves a break from our daily work routine. One thing led to another, and a random Google search regarding Nottingham's ghosts led us to the discovery that people were being sponsored to stay overnight at the Galleries of Justice. After casually mentioning this to a couple of colleagues and members of the health club, we were soon being dared to take up this challenge. To reiterate, we couldn't have been more skeptical of the existence of ghosts, and only agreed to go through with this to help raise money for charity and to have some fun. At the time, I was living in the Lace Market close to Trivet Square, and literally only a couple of 100 meters from the galleries. It was warm and sunny on the Saturday evening in question, and just before 8 p.m., we walked the short distance to the venue. On arrival, we helped ourselves to the tea and coffee and waited until everybody who was taking part in the activity had arrived. We chatted to various other couples and groups and found that people had driven from like hundreds of miles away. In particular, we befriended two girls from the Birmingham group who were equally as skeptical as us, and also they were just here to just have some fun. Once everyone had arrived, there were about 20 of us in total. The organizers addressed the room. It was explained that at times we would be separated into smaller groups and taken to various locations around the sites at different times. The place was quiet and still, and the only noise that we could hear was coming from the tapas bar next door. It was made very clear to us that there was a high possibility that we would neither see nor hear anything during the course of the night that would be proof of the existence of a ghost or the like, and under no circumstances would these people be prepared to jeopardize their status as experts in the field by trying to convince us otherwise, or pull the wool over our eyes and endeavor to create a scare. Once we were all convinced that this wouldn't be a staged event, we were split up into groups of about 7 and headed off in different directions, each group led by a guide. I had visited the galleries on 2 previous occasions, and although these visits had taken place in the daytime, and while the building was, by design, couldn't be described as a welcoming place, I hadn't felt it to be any way spooky or uncomfortable. As we made our way from the old courtroom and down the first part of the gallows, despite it being dark, I felt no more uncomfortable than I had the previous visits. Prior to the arrival, we had all been instructed to bring torches along with us for the night, and with the main lights being switched off. This is how we would navigate our way around the site during the course of the next few hours. Despite the assurance that the evening's events would not be staged, yes, the flickering beams from the torches did certainly aim a sense of drama. Although, to be fair, a ghost watch under bright fluorescent tubes would neither be practical nor welcoming. Our first point of interest were the cells. They were as to be expected, cramped, dank, and uncomfortable. While it was easy to feel some pity for all of the poor souls who had been locked up here for such petty crimes, there were no feelings of unease or of anything ghostly. We wondered if this would change though, as 2 or 3 of us at a time were invited into the condemned prisoner cell, and the door loudly slammed shut behind us. We spent a few minutes in there, with the torches switched off, and while I certainly wouldn't have been happy to be in there alone, there was still no feeling of unease. From the cells, with our torches once again illuminated, we were led along what I can only describe as a tunnel or a corridor made from stone and dirt. It was not much more than 1 meter wide and 2 meters high, and a little claustrophobic. Myself and Carl found ourselves at the back of the single file group, and after just a few minutes of walking, I felt something hit the back of my ankles. It was nothing particularly painful, just like a stone being kicked up perhaps from another foot. I stopped walking for a second and pointed my torch downwards. I saw a little pebble 1 inch or so in diameter, just coming to rest. As I began to realize that I might have just kicked it again myself, a second pebble, smaller in size, shot past me and struck Carl in the back of the leg. He spun around with this expression on his face, as if he wanted to ask me if I was the one that had thrown it at him. When the 3rd or 4th pebble was thrown towards us, at a low trajectory and at great speed, the obvious answer is, of course, someone was throwing them at us. But we immediately shine our torches back down the tunnel, and it honestly would have been impossible for anyone to have thrown them and then just vanish behind us without us seeing them or hearing them. We hurried and caught up with the rest of the group, and without making too much of a fuss, we simply explained that we thought that we just had some stones thrown at us. As we continued to walk, we were taken to this old washroom, a deep pit where prisoners would literally be thrown into and left to rot. After an hour or so of exploring and learning about the history of the site, we made our way back to the street level, to our original meeting room. We had coffee and chatted with the Birmingham girls, explaining to them in more detail about these pebbles. I'm not sure if they believed us, but without fabrication or embellishment, we described exactly what had happened. After a short coffee break, we were taken as one large group into the deepest part of the gal. This was simply rooms and walkways that had been carved out of rock. Despite the pebbles incident, and I know I'm speaking for Carl too, we still weren't really particularly scared. We walked as far as we possibly could, along and down the tunnel, until we came to 2 adjoining caves that were dead ends. The caves were about 10 meters and approximately 15 feet high. We were exploring for just a few minutes, and with the beams from like 20 torches easily illuminating the rooms. And apart from the vast number of small bones that we believe were remains of rats and pigeons and some ineligible scrawlings on the cave walls, there was nothing really to see. We were gathering around, and as one of the guides began to explain that we were going to try a kind of seance, a guy to our left suddenly, in a startled voice, exclaimed, "Fuck this. That's enough for me, man." Of course, everyone immediately turned to face him, and the poor man not only looked as white as a sheet, but something was visibly upsetting him. One of the guides tried his best to reassure him, but he was clearly wasting his time. The man was naturally asked what had happened, or what he had seen, but his only response was, I can't tell you, but it was definitely there." Despite pleas that he would stay with the group, he was adamant on leaving. One of the guides, along with the person who had accompanied him on this trip, all left and made their ways back to the tunnel and to the coffee room. Notwithstanding the fact we had just watched this seemingly sane person suddenly become so emotional, the fact that we hadn't seen anything ourselves in the empty cave, and the fact that I didn't know what this thing was that he had seen, once again we pretty much shrugged our shoulders and got on with it. The guide invited us all to stand in this circle and told us that we needed to switch off our torches and hold hands tightly with the people either sides of us. If I'm completely honest, most of us found this a little far-fetched, and there were a few smirks and giggles, which were met with the look of annoyance from the guides. Once the torches were switched off, and everyone was holding hands, one of the guides began asking if any spirits were present, and if they would make themselves known to us. Nothing happened. He repeated the same question, and after a few seconds, a girl to our right gave out a noise that wasn't quite of a yelp or a scream, but disturbing enough for all of us to jump back as it broke the silence. The torches all came on while she was clearly distressed, and she explained to us that she had felt something very large standing behind me, and I could feel the breath on my neck. I have to say, I still wasn't convinced. I believed that she believed it, but my skeptical mind told me that because she was standing pretty close to the tunnel, that it was most likely just a draft. Once everyone was composed, the guide instructed us to turn off our torches once more, and then he repeated the question again, on 2 or 3 occasions, without there being any sign that someone or something wished to communicate. He then asked for a volunteer to try to communicate, and one of the Birmingham girls stepped forward. He also had asked if there was anyone that had a red filter on their torch, and explained that apparently spirits are attracted to the red light, rather than a white light. The torch was placed in the middle of the cave, and we all circled around it, standing a couple of meters away from the red glow, holding hands and listening to this girl as she repeated the question, "Are there any spirits here that wish to communicate?" Nothing happened. She repeated the question a second time, spontaneously adding, "If there is anyone, can you make the light go out?" Immediately as that last word came out of her mouth, the cave fell into darkness. Darkness filled with screams. The red torch had gone out. Eventually, as the regular torches began to turn on again, with heartbeats racing, the guide managed to regain some kind of decorum. People all circled around, us included, were looking at each other and cursing whilst wearing nervous smiles. Once everyone was relatively calm, the guide explained that it could have simply just been a coincidence or a torch malfunction. However, the latter was quickly dispelled by the owner of the torch. He flicked the switch on and then off, and each time it responded perfectly. "Okay, we'll try it again," he said, asking the girl if she was happy to continue. He placed the torch upwards, sending the red glow to the top of the cave, then stood back. We all had held hands again, while some stared at the torch. The rest of us just looked at the girl as she began to speak. "If that was you, can you do it again?" The last syllable of the last word was barely leaving her lips, when once more, we were thrown into darkness. This time the screams that were accompanied by the darkness were less jovial. We were scared. One by one the torches again starting to come back on, and the guy tried his best to calm everyone down. He spoke about how, in his opinion, he was convinced that we had made contact, or vice versa. But he didn't want us to outstay our welcome and provoke anything that had been here, so then they became unpleasant or even violent. It was while he was talking that I looked around at the group and noticed that most, if not all, were staring in the direction of myself and Carl, and either smiling or chuckling. It was then that I realized out of the whole group, the 2 big, strong fitness instructors were the only ones that were still holding hands with each other. Sorry for sharing this part, Carl. Following further explanations on why a certain light color and noise can attract spirits, and examples of previous experiences the guide had encountered, We then moved on, through the washing room, to some living quarters. The room was no more than 10 meters square, and in one corner was a large wooden bed. At this point, everyone had their torches turned on, and the room was clearly illuminated. Before I continue, I need to stress that Carl was the nearest person to me, and he was standing clearly visible on my left shoulder. There was nobody for a couple of meters in front of or behind me. Suddenly, completely out of the blue, I felt as if somebody had grabbed me hard between the legs. Immediately, the pain radiated to my stomach to an extent that I held my belly and almost doubled over. The more considered part of my brain was telling me that it could have been a reaction to the nervousness, that it was subconsciously just a feeling, although I was just shocked and actually a little concerned at how suddenly it had come. I said nothing to Carl, just listened as the guide spoke. What came out of his mouth next will stay with me forever. He explained that at any given time, between 20 to 30 women were forced to live in this one small room. And while this was bad enough, he further went on to explain that it was regular practice for jailers, drunk on rum, to regularly do things to the women who were locked up in there. He then said, on occasions, some of the male members of the group have either been attacked or actually grabbed by their privates. He paused and then asked, "Is anyone experiencing anything like that?" There was simply no way that I was going to share what just happened to me with this group of complete strangers. I wouldn't have believed it from anyone, so why should they? I did, however, tell Carl as soon as we left that room what had happened. And only a few minutes later of leaving that room, the stomach pain disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. In the early hours of the morning and following another coffee break, a number of participants had decided that it was late enough for them, and with their departure, our numbers dwindled. 4 of about a remaining 8 or 10 of us were taken, with a guide to the courtroom, where we moved about freely and took photos of empty viewings, in the hope to capture an image or something. A number of us did catch what we thought were interesting orbs. However, these were dismissed by the guide as simple particles of dust caught on the flash of the camera. Once again, before I continue, I need to reiterate that we had walked all around the courtroom, between benches and tables, and the 4 of us, along with the guide, were without any doubt the only ones in the courtroom at the time. We all gathered close to the judge's chair and decided to try once more to communicate. The torches were switched off, and while it was still relatively dark, the light filtering through from the streets allowed us to make out images of each other and that of a close vicinity. We stood in silence for a few minutes, waiting for something to happen. Then, from just a meter or so behind me, we clearly heard slow footsteps, wooden shoes on the wooden floor of the courtroom, simply walked from behind me to next to me to in front of me, then faded into emptiness of the dark room as they further away. Every single one of us heard them as clear as day. If our eyes had been closed, we would have believed that somebody was just walking slowly past us. The interesting thing was, while we had no doubt that we just experienced something ghostly, not one of us felt uncomfortable or scared by it. It was more of a case of, wow, did that just happen? Because we were all rather excited by this. We decided to fall silent again to see that if maybe it would happen again. There were no footsteps, but a tune was whistled from about 5 meters away from one side of the court. We all glared at each other, and of course our eyes were wide open. Was that from outside? We whispered. We waited in silence, and just a few seconds later, it happened again. It clearly wasn't coming from the bars outside. It was just in front of us in the courtroom. It was at one point that it was just suggested that it might have been the wind, but that wasn't possible. It was clearly a tune. We waited quietly for it to happen a third time, and when nothing happened for a couple of minutes, one of the members of our group whistled the fourth tune. Immediately the tune mimicked from the dark, only a couple of meters in front of us. Our eyes were now accustomed to the light, and we could see well enough to know for sure that there was simply nothing there making that noise. The mimicking happened on one more occasion, but following that, despite our continued efforts, there was nothing. And it was at that time that we had our final coffee break. It was almost 5 a.m., and we were told that if we wanted to, for the next 30 to 45 minutes, we could wander off unguided to the areas that we visited during the night, on the understanding that we didn't touch anything. We were all excited, and the remaining members of the group soon disappeared in various directions. Myself and Carl had decided that we would go back to the tunnel where we got the thrones thrown at us, and to the cave at the end where the guy had seen the figure, if you want to say. We walked through the courtroom and down the iron spiral staircase that led to the first level and the newest of the cells. We had been in this location at least 4 times during the night, and I had also been there on my previous visits to the galleries. There is simple cardboard displays offering information and deportation, but nothing in the slightest is scary or threatening. As we passed the display and reached out to the condemned cell, we were about to turn left and head down the tunnel, when in perfect sync, we froze. Not just scared, but frozen with fear. We both immediately started to feel sick to our stomachs, and we were sure that if we had taken another step, something bad was going to happen. Something was there, and it didn't want us there. It was like nothing that we had felt at any other stage of this course tonight. We felt petrified, vulnerable, and actually had serious concerns for our safety. We wanted nothing to do with this, so we just backed out very carefully, almost apologetic, but as quick as we could. As a side note, the only time that I had ever felt like this, remotely similar to that sickness in my stomach, was a trip to Alcatraz in 2005. It didn't happen in any of the cells, corridors, or the hospital, or the morgue. They were all supposedly haunted, but outside in the exercise yard, under the San Francisco sunshine, I felt the same uncomfortable sickness that convinced me that something was there, and it was not happy that I was there. At about 5:30 a.m., we decided that whatever we just experienced was enough to convince us that it was time to leave. We walked the 200 meters back to my apartment in the gatehouse and discussed the night's events over a couple of beers from the fridge. Carl left at approximately 8 a.m., and I dropped off to sleep on the sofa. I woke up and watched whatever the football was on the particular Sunday afternoon, but didn't do really anything energetic other than making a quick bite to eat. On the Monday morning, I woke up to go to work, and as normal as that usually was, but I found myself so weak that I was almost paralyzed. I dragged myself out past the ice arena and up to the windmill surgery in Sneaton, where I was diagnosed with a severe case of pneumonia. Just 36 hours earlier, I was in possibly the best physical shape of my life due to training almost every day. However, over the next 2 weeks, I inexplicably lost 2 stone in weight. I continued to live in the gatehouse for several years after that Saturday night. But from then on, I was never comfortable walking past the steps of the galleries of justice, especially after dark. Hey guys, I just wanted to say thanks for watching and I really hope you enjoyed it. I've been trying to get more of these videos that you guys have been liking a lot more. I'm going to start posting more polls and different ideas that you guys might like, so make sure to be on the lookout for that. Once again, thanks for watching and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and if you're new to this channel, subscribe. We're doing nothing but growing. If you would like to see more of these, make sure to comment down in the comment section as well. Make sure to check out the links in my description as well, my Twitter, Instagram, and even my Gmail if you want to submit a story. Make sure to go check those out. But with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one. I don't really know what to say now, so bye.